The winding road felt less like a path and more like a scar etched into the dense, rain-slicked forest. For hours, I'd watched the towering firs and hemlocks blur into an oppressive green wall, the sky a perpetual overcast gray that seemed to press down on the roof of my old sedan. Every mile further north into the Pacific Northwest, the air grew heavier, thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying pine needles, pulling me deeper into the isolation I craved. Blackwood Manor. The name itself felt like a sigh, a whispered warning. My great-aunt Alara had died mysteriously, the solicitor had said, a hushed tone in his voice. Not quite pity, not quite fear, but something in between. Blackwood Manor was mine now. An inheritance I hadn't expected, from a relative I barely remembered, a reclusive botanist whose existence had been little more than a whisper in my childhood. I saw it as a chance, a cavernous space to fill with something other than the emptiness that had settled in my chest after everything. A fresh start, a place to simply be. The gates appeared abruptly, two colossal iron behemoths swallowed by ivy and rust, their ornate scrollwork hinting at a grandeur long since surrendered to the encroaching wilderness. I wrestled with the heavy chain, the metal groaning in protest, and pushed one gate inward, a shriek of tortured hinges echoing through the silent woods. The drive was a cracked, moss-covered ribbon, curving upwards through an even denser tangle of trees, their branches interlaced so tightly that only slivers of the gray sky pierced through. Then, it stood there. Ivy, not just clinging, but consuming, draped over entire sections of the facade, a living shroud. A strange, almost organic quality permeated the decay. It wasn't just falling apart, it felt like it was being reabsorbed. A prickle of unease. I killed the engine. The sudden silence was absolute, save for the persistent drizzle beginning to tap on the car's roof. It clung to the back of my throat, a taste of rich, fertile soil, perhaps. Or something that had grown in it. I inserted the heavy, ornate key the solicitor had given me. Dust motes danced in the slivers of weak light filtering through gaps in the boarded windows. The entry hall was vast, a cavernous space with a grand, sweeping staircase that disappeared into the gloom of the upper floors. My footsteps on the wide, grimy floorboards sounded unnaturally loud, each creak and groan of the ancient structure amplifying the feeling of being watched, evaluated. I moved through the ground floor, a determined exploration. Drawing rooms with shrouded furniture, a dining room where a chandelier hung like a skeletal spider, a library whose shelves still held hundreds of leather-bound volumes, their pages curled with damp. Everywhere, Alara's presence lingered. Pressed botanical specimens, some in frames, others simply tucked into books, their delicate forms ghostly and fragile. Sketchbooks lay open on a dusty desk, filled with intricate drawings of flora I didn't recognize, their tendrils and blossoms rendered with an almost obsessive detail. There was a faint, musty smell, but beneath it, that same cloying sweetness, stronger now as if emanating from the very walls. The house felt alive, not in a comforting way, but in a way that made the hairs on my arms rise. They sounded like breathing, a slow, deliberate respiration. I found myself listening, straining to differentiate the natural sounds of an old house from something else. Something that felt deliberate. The drizzle had intensified into a steady rain, and the wind had picked up, howling through the surrounding trees. The garden was a wilderness, a tangled, overgrown expanse where once manicured paths were now swallowed by rampant growth. I plunged into it, the rain plastering my hair to my forehead, hoping the raw air would clear my unease. I needed to see the boundaries of this place, to understand the extent of my inheritance. Standing stark against the churning gray sky, battered by the lashing rain and roaring wind, was a decrepit guard tower in a storm. It was a ruin, a truncated stone cylinder draped in the same tenacious ivy that clung to the manor. Its battlements had crumbled, leaving jagged teeth against the horizon. The tower wasn't just old. It felt wrong. A sentinel for something unseen, something ancient and deeply rooted in this desolate land. I stood there for a long moment, the rain soaking through my jacket, the wind trying to tear my focus from the tower. Blackwood Manor wasn't just an escape, it was a trap, and I had just walked right into it. The house and its grounds didn't just hold dust and memories, and the storm, now raging with full force, felt like its welcoming embrace. Rust wept down their ornate spikes, a metallic crimson staining the moss-covered pillars. I killed the engine, the sudden silence deafening after the hum of the road. Beyond the gates, a long, winding driveway, swallowed by encroaching ferns and skeletal branches, disappeared into the gloom. This was it, my great-aunt Alara's legacy, my escape. Pushing through the creaking gates, which shrieked a protest that echoed through the woods, I drove slowly, the sedan's tires crunching on gravel and snapping twigs. Turrets clawed at the low-hanging clouds, and ivy, thick as a man's arm, clung to the walls, snaking its way towards the slate roof. It wasn't just old, it felt ancient, burdened by untold years. The front door, a heavy slab of oak studded with tarnished brass, groaned open with a theatrical sigh. Inside, the air was thick, stagnant, tasting of dust, old wood, and something else. A faint, earthy sweetness, like a forgotten floral arrangement left to rot. A grand staircase, its banister carved with intricate twisting vines, spiraled upwards into the gloom. I spent the first few hours just wandering. A ghost in a house of ghosts. Dust sheets draped over furniture like shrouds, obscuring shapes, making every object a potential phantom. As dusk began to settle, painting the sky in bruised purples and grays, I found myself drawn to a large window in what must have been a study. Outside, the storm hadn't broken but intensified, rain lashing against the glass, blurring the world. It looked like it had been standing for centuries, forgotten and defiant, yet ultimately succumbing to the relentless weather. The sight only deepened my sense of profound isolation. I tried to make a space for myself in a small, less intimidating sitting room. I pulled back a dust sheet from a worn velvet armchair, revealing a faint impression where Alara must have sat. It was then, as I was trying to wipe away the grime from a small, ornate table, that I heard it. It was indistinct, a breath of sound, easily dismissed as the house settling, the old timbers groaning under the weight of time and the relentless storm. But then it came again, closer this time, just at the edge of my hearing. It wasn't words, not really, but a sibilant hiss, a rustle that felt too deliberate to be the wind. I froze, my hand still on the dusty tabletop. I held my breath, straining to hear. Nothing. But the unease had taken root. A floorboard would creak upstairs, not with the gradual settling of an empty building, but with a sharp, singular snap, as if someone had just shifted their weight. My heart began to beat a little faster, a persistent thrumming beneath my ribs. Flashlight in hand, I decided to seek out the conservatory Alara was so famous for. Her notes, found among the sparse legal papers, had spoken of it as her sanctuary, her living heart. Following a narrow, drafty corridor off the main hall, I pushed open a heavy, unlatched door. The air shifted, growing warmer, impossibly humid, and the earthy sweetness I'd noticed earlier intensified, becoming almost cloying. My flashlight beam cut through the gloom, revealing a breathtaking, terrifying spectacle. The conservatory was a colossal glass structure, a cathedral of green, but it wasn't merely overgrown, it was consumed. Vines thick as pythons writhed up the ironwork, their tendrils pressing against the glass panes, obscuring the stormy sky. Ferns with fronds the size of oars unfurled in impossible shades of emerald and jade. Flowers, unlike any I'd ever seen, bloomed in luminous, unnatural colors. Deep purples that pulsed with an inner light. Reds so vibrant they seemed to bleed into the air. The beauty was undeniable, but it was a beauty that felt predatory, suffocating. The plants weren't just growing. They seemed to thrive with a fierce, almost violent energy. I stepped further in, my boots sinking slightly into the damp, soft soil that covered the tiled floor. The air was thick with the scent of rich earth, decay, and that same unnerving sweetness. Then, I saw it. A shudder ran through its length, and a cluster of delicate, bell-shaped flowers at its tip quivered. It wasn't the wind. The air inside was still and heavy. It was a movement that felt alive, deliberate. This time, they were clearer, closer. A breathy, sibilant chorus, like 1,000 insect wings rustling, or dry leaves skittering across a vast, unseen floor. I couldn't make out words, but the sound felt directed, almost expectant. And they were waiting. Now the manor loomed, a hulking silhouette against the bruised sky, its dark windows like vacant eyes. It led me, unerringly, to a set of heavy, arched double doors tucked away behind what must have once been a grand ballroom. Beyond them, the air changed completely. A humid breath, thick and cloying, enveloped me, carrying the rich, damp perfume of soil and something else. A sharp, almost metallic tang that was entirely unfamiliar. I pushed the doors open further, the hinges groaning in protest, and stepped into a world utterly alien to the gray desolation of the Pacific Northwest. This was the conservatory. It was vast, a cathedral of glass and steel stretching upwards, the panes blurred by condensation and the relentless downpour outside. Inside, a jungle pulsed with an unnatural vibrancy. Tendrils thick as my arm snaked across the floor, climbed the walls, and even seemed to pierce the glass ceiling in places, their tips disappearing into the mist-shrouded heights. The air thrummed with the buzz of unseen insects and the drip, drip, drip of water from towering fronds. This was an ecosystem utterly untamed, a sprawling, verdant maw. As I ventured deeper, the plants grew stranger, their forms more grotesque. One specimen resembled a cluster of fleshy, gray-green fingers reaching from the soil, its tips quivering slightly. I ran a hand over a leaf, its surface cool and slick, like wet leather. This wasn't just a garden. It was a carefully cultivated wilderness, a living sculpture of the bizarre. A small, rickety wooden table, half swallowed by a curtain of broad, waxy leaves, caught my eye. On it, amidst terracotta pots filled with spent soil and a scattering of dried, brittle stems, lay a stack of leather-bound journals. Ilara's journals. My great-aunt, the reclusive botanist, had left her secrets here, cradled by her strange creations. I picked up the topmost book, its cover soft with age, and a fine layer of green dust flaked onto my fingers. The handwriting inside was precise, elegant, but quickly became erratic. Early entries detailed meticulous observations of growth rates, soil compositions, and light exposure for various exotic flora. Specimen 7, Vitis nocturnus, one entry read, exhibits remarkable heliotropism, turning away from direct light. A nocturnal bloom is anticipated. Innocent enough. But then, a shift. The tone grew more personal, the observations less scientific, more obsessive. The growth, an entry from years later declared, responds to subtle energies. A resonance, a hum beneath the earth. It is not merely absorbing nutrients, it is listening. The words were scrawled, heavy with emphasis. My gaze drifted to the tangle of roots and stems around me, the way they seemed to lean inwards, towards the table, towards me. Further pages spoke of the root, capitalized like a proper noun. The root expands, Ilara had written, a consciousness spreading beneath the entire estate. The manor breathes with it. My own pulse echoes its slow, deliberate beat. I felt a shiver trace its way down my spine. The house breathing. I remembered the subtle creaks and groans, the strange drafts. I'd dismissed them as an old house settling, but Alara's words painted a far more unsettling picture. Not truly. It hungers for connection, for integration. My eyes darted around the conservatory, the dense foliage now seeming less like individual plants and more like components of a single vast organism. Through a large, rain-streaked pane of glass, I caught a glimpse of the outside world, momentarily tearing my gaze from Alara's disturbing confessions. It stood sentinel, ancient, and crumbling, a stark reminder of the estate's forgotten history, now a silent witness to whatever Alara had unleashed here. Alara's final entries were almost illegible, a frantic mess of looping strokes and desperate pleas. The integration is nearly complete, she'd scribbled. It demands more. It demands me. But it will not stop with me. It seeks a new host, a new route, to anchor its vast and terrible reach. The pen had dug deep into the paper, tearing through in places. My breath hitched. My eyes swept across the labyrinthine growth, the strange, hungry shapes, the almost imperceptible sway of a particularly thick vine that seemed to pulse with a faint internal light, and in my own. Finally, the iron gates of Blackwood Manor, rusted and overgrown, loomed into view. I pushed them open with a groan of metal, the sound swallowed by the damp air, and drove through. Inside, the manor swallowed me whole. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light that pierced the grimy windows, illuminating vast, empty spaces. I spent the first few hours just wandering, trying to get my bearings, a strange mix of awe and unease coiling in my gut. The sheer scale of the place was overwhelming. Alara, my great-aunt, had been a woman of peculiar tastes, but the extent of her reclusion, her devotion to this, was only now truly sinking in. I found a relatively clear space in what I assumed was the main parlor, dropping my duffel bag onto a faded armchair. I blinked, and it was gone. Just my normal reflection, the dusty room, the empty space. My phone had barely registered a single bar since I'd left the main road. Now, in the manor, it displayed no service. I walked from room to room, holding it aloft like a divining rod. But nothing. I even tried the ancient landline in the study, its rotary dial an antique curiosity. I lifted the receiver. Dead air. Not even a dial tone, just a faint, almost imperceptible hum, like a wire stretched taut and vibrating with a low, distant thrum. The realization hit me. I was completely cut off. A sudden gust of wind rattled the windows, and I peered out, trying to pierce the gloom. Through the driving sheets, I could just make out the silhouette of a structure on a distant ridge, barely visible against the churning clouds. The sight of it, isolated and battered, only amplified my own sense of confinement. The house, I thought, was truly a world unto itself. I retreated to the parlor, trying to ignore the prickling sensation on the back of my neck. I picked up a worn, leather-bound book from a nearby table, one of Alara's botany texts, its pages filled with meticulous sketches of exotic plants. I'd set it down on the armchair beside me while I went to fetch a glass of water from the kitchen. When I returned, the book wasn't there. My brow furrowed. I hadn't touched it. I hadn't moved it. It wasn't on the floor, nor on the adjacent table. Then I saw it, resting on the mantelpiece above the fireplace, a good 10 feet from where I'd left it. I knew, with absolute certainty, that I had not put it there. My hand trembled slightly as I reached for it, the leather cool beneath my fingertips. It felt heavy, substantial, not like something that could just drift. It wasn't a sound I could pinpoint, but rather a sensation, a vibration against my eardrums, a suggestion of voices murmuring just beyond the threshold of hearing. I spun around, convinced I wasn't alone. I tried my phone again, a desperate, futile gesture. The screen remained stubbornly blank, the battery icon now showing a sliver of red, even though I'd charged it fully before leaving. It was draining, fast, inexplicably. The house wasn't just old and isolated. It felt actively hostile. It was cutting me off, severing my connections, drawing me deeper into its silent, breathing maw. The sleep I managed to snatch was thin, brittle, like old parchment threatening to tear at the slightest touch. It offered no real rest, only a deeper plunge into the manor's peculiar darkness. My dreams were a grotesque parody of the conservatory. The air was thick, humid, clinging to my skin like a second layer. Instead of the gentle rustle of leaves, I heard a slow, wet thrumming, a sound that vibrated not just in my ears but deep within my chest. The plants themselves were no longer just static specimens. They writhed. Tendrils, thick as my arm, snaked across the floor, their surfaces slick and glistening. They pulsed with a faint greenish light, a sickly luminescence that cast long, distorted shadows, making the very walls appear to breathe. I saw Ilara in this dream, or a twisted echo of her. Her hands, gnarled and stained with earth, were caressing one of the larger bulbous growths, almost reverently. As I watched, the growth seemed to open, a fleshy, petal-like structure slowly unfolding to reveal something pulsing within. My mouth was dry, my tongue heavy. Then the growth turned towards me, and from its depths, a single, unblinking eye opened, an eye that was Ilara's, ancient and knowing, but utterly devoid of humanity. The light filtering through the heavy curtains was a watery gray, offering little comfort. A headache had taken root behind my eyes, a dull throb that pulsed in time with the lingering phantom beat from my dream. I tried to shake it off, to convince myself it was just a dream, a natural consequence of my new, isolated surroundings. But as I walked towards the bathroom, a flicker at the edge of my vision caught my attention. I spun around, but there was nothing, just the familiar dusty wood. I told myself it was fatigue, the trick of the light. Later, while making coffee in the cavernous kitchen, the hallucinations became more insistent. The intricate patterns of the wallpaper seemed to writhe, the floral motifs elongating, twisting into unfamiliar organic shapes that stretched and contracted. I rubbed my eyes, hard, then opened them again. The patterns were still there, still shifting, though perhaps less overtly. The roots had receded, but the impression lingered, a phantom sensation of movement. My hands trembled as I poured the coffee, the hot liquid sloshing over the rim of the mug. This wasn't just tiredness. This was something else entirely. A restless energy began to gnaw at me. I needed to move, to get out of the house, to breathe air that didn't feel thick with unseen presences. The weather outside was a fitting mirror to my internal state. A relentless, driving rain lashed against the windows, whipped by a fierce wind. I pulled on my jacket, feeling an odd, almost magnetic pull towards the neglected grounds. I pushed through the dense, dripping undergrowth, the rain plastering my hair to my forehead. The wind howled, a mournful, hungry sound. The estate felt endless, swallowed by the encroaching forest. It stood like a skeletal finger against the bruised sky, its stone crumbling, its wooden elements rotted and sagging. A strange, almost painful curiosity drew me closer. The air around the tower felt charged, heavier than the surrounding storm. As I neared its base, I noticed a faint, ethereal glow emanating from a crevice in the crumbling stone, just above the reach of the thickest vines. It was a soft, pulsing green, almost identical to the light I'd seen in my dream. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. Tucked deep within the fissure, nestled amongst a clump of moss, was a single bioluminescent spore. It was perfectly spherical, about the size of a marble, its surface smooth and slightly damp. The green light it emitted was gentle, hypnotic, drawing my gaze like a moth to a flame. My initial instinct was to recoil, to recognize it as another manifestation of the strange, unhealthy life force that permeated this place. But a more potent sensation took hold, a growing, unsettling compulsion. It wasn't a thought, not exactly, but a deep, irrational yearning. My hand, seemingly of its own accord, reached for it. My fingers closed around the cool, smooth sphere. The light pulsed against my palm, a warmth spreading through my skin, up my arm, and into my chest. It wasn't words, not exactly, but an impression, a feeling of deep, abiding hunger, a gentle invitation. My mind felt porous. The line between what was real and what was merely a figment of my unraveling sanity blurred into an indistinguishable haze. Was I truly seeing this spore, feeling this undeniable pull? Or was the house itself planting these sensations, guiding my hand, twisting my perception? The thought sent a shiver down my spine, but the compulsion was stronger. I clutched the spore tighter, its soft glow a beacon in the storm-swept gloom, and felt a profound, disturbing sense of belonging. My dreams were a grotesque parody of the conservatory. I woke with the lingering taste of loam in my mouth, the scent of something sickly sweet and green still clinging to my nostrils. The morning light, what little of it penetrated the heavy, overcast sky, felt inadequate. The house itself seemed to absorb it, leaving the corners of every room in a perpetual twilight. A persistent, low rumble vibrated through the floorboards, the distant growl of a coming storm. Despite the unease, despite the profound weariness that settled deep in my bones, a fierce determination gnawed at me. I had to know. I found my way back to the study, the heavy oak door groaning a reluctant welcome. I pulled out the next volume of Alara's journals, its leather binding cracked and brittle. This one felt heavier, denser with secrets. Her early entries in this volume were still meticulous, detailing soil compositions and propagation techniques, but the precision began to fray around the edges. Her handwriting, once neat and contained, started to sprawl. The ink occasionally smudged as if she'd been writing in haste, or perhaps with trembling hands. Then came the shift. The whispers grow louder, I read, my breath catching in my throat. They are not the wind, not the house settling. They are voices. From the root, through the soil, into the very walls. My skin prickled. This wasn't the eloquent, if eccentric botanist I'd imagined. This was something else entirely. Alara wasn't just observing her plants. He was conversing with them. Or believed he was. They crave understanding, another entry declared, the words scrawled almost frantically across the page. They desire to know, and to be known. She began to describe the plants not as specimens, but as entities. She gave them attributes, intentions. She spoke of their collective consciousness, a vast, sprawling intelligence rooted deep beneath the manor. My mind struggled to reconcile this with anything I knew. Plants, sentient, communicating. It was lunacy. The storm was closing in. I forced myself to refocus on the journal. They grow hungry, Alara had written. The phrase repeated several times on a single page, each iteration more forceful than the last. The soil is rich, but their hunger is not of the earth. It is deeper, a different kind of sustenance. My stomach clenched. A different kind of sustenance. What could that mean? My mind immediately went to the strange organic growths, the pulsing veins in the conservatory. Not water, not light. To appease the burgeoning awareness, to help it flourish. They grow stronger with each gift. The manor breathes with a new vigor. Offerings. The word echoed in the silent study, louder than the storm outside. What kind of offerings? The implication hung in the air, a foul, invisible vapor. I thought of the missing caretaker, the vague, unsettling feeling I'd had about the manor's isolation. Had Alara truly believed he was feeding something that needed more? The final entries in the journal were less coherent, more a stream of consciousness. Paragraphs blurred into single, breathless sentences. "They are not merely botanical specimens," she'd scrawled, the words underscored multiple times. "They are the mind of the manor, the heart, the very pulse. And now, they call for a new host, a new consciousness to merge with their own, to expand, to consume." I slammed the journal shut. My hands were shaking, my palms slick with sweat. Alara hadn't just been tending a garden. He had been cultivating a living, breathing, thinking entity, and she'd been its willing accomplice, its sacrificial priestess. They were alive in a way no plant should be. And they were sentient. And they were hungry. And for a split second, I swore I saw a flicker of movement within its broken windows, a pale, wavering light that vanished as quickly as it appeared. The guard tower. Why would Alara have a guard tower? And why, in the midst of this raging storm, did I feel an inexplicable, terrifying pull towards it? The word sacrificial hung in the air, a chilling echo of her final maddening entries. My great-aunt, a quiet botanist, had been feeding something. And if her words were to be believed, that something was still here, still hungry. The thought was a physical weight, pressing down on me, making it hard to breathe in the suffocating quiet of the study. I forced myself to pick up the journal again, my fingers trembling as they brushed over the brittle pages. There had to be more. A way to understand, a way to fight back, or at least a way to find out what I was truly up against. My eyes scanned the frantic, looping script, past the ravings about symbiosis and the Great Awakening, until a specific passage snagged my attention. It sleeps mostly in the old watchman's perch, deep beneath the moss-eaten stone. The roots find their way, always. Follow the sound of the deep earth sighing, where the light cannot reach. The true heart beats there. The old watchman's perch. It was a ruin, I'd assumed, a forgotten relic. But Alara's words twisted its meaning, turning it into a waypoint, a doorway. Rain began to lash against the manor, a steady drumming that quickly intensified into a torrential downpour. The sky outside had turned a bruised, ugly purple, and the air crackled with the distant rumble of thunder. A storm was brewing, a true Pacific Northwest squall, perfect for shrouding whatever I was about to find. Or, perhaps, perfect for trapping me. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs, but a strange, grim determination had taken root. I grabbed a powerful flashlight from the desk drawer, its beam cutting a stark white line through the dim room, and then a heavy wrench. Not much, but better than nothing. Stepping out of the study, the manor felt different. The usual creaks and groans of settling timber seemed to morph into something more organic, more deliberate. The house was listening. Or maybe I was just finally listening to it. Each floorboard I crossed seemed to sigh beneath my weight, the air growing heavier, smelling of damp earth and something vaguely sweet, like overripe fruit. A scent I was starting to associate with the encroaching strangeness. The walk across the sprawling grounds was brutal. The storm had fully erupted. Wind howled, whipping my hair into my eyes and pressing the rain against me like a physical assault. Thunder cracked overhead, a deafening roar that made the ground tremble. It looked even more forlorn and ancient up close, ivy-choked and leaning precariously, as if one more gust might send it tumbling. I pushed open the heavy, rusted iron door that hung half off its hinges. The interior was a damp, circular chamber, choked with cobwebs and the smell of mildew and wet stone. Rain streamed in through gaps in the roof and shattered window openings, puddling on the uneven flagstones. No, that wasn't it. Ilara had said, "Deep beneath." I swept the beam around the base of the tower. The stone floor was uneven, covered in a thick layer of wet debris, fallen leaves, crumbling mortar, and a peculiar, slick green moss that seemed to glow faintly where the light caught it. And there, almost completely obscured by the moss and a pile of rubble, was a faint seam in the stone. It wasn't a natural crack. It was too regular, too deliberate. A hidden door. There was no handle, no obvious latch. I remembered Ilara's cryptic words. Follow the sound of the deep earth's sighing. I pressed my ear against the cold stone, straining to hear over the roar of the storm. Nothing but the wind and rain. Then, a low thrumming, a vibration I felt more than heard, seemed to resonate from deep within the stone itself. It was almost imperceptible, a bass note beneath the chaos of the storm. I pushed, I pulled, I ran my hands over every inch of the seam. Finally, my fingers brushed against a small, almost invisible indentation near the base, disguised by a patch of the glowing moss. I pressed hard. With a grinding groan that felt like the tower itself was shifting, a section of the floor, perhaps 3 feet square, slowly depressed and then began to swing inward, revealing a gaping black maw beneath. The thrumming intensified, a low, rhythmic pulse that vibrated through the flagstones and up into my bones. This was it. A rough-hewn tunnel, impossibly ancient, spiraled downwards. The walls weren't smooth stone. They were lined with a thick, fibrous growth, like matted roots and mycelial strands, glistening with moisture. The air grew warmer, humid, and the strange, sweet odor became cloying, almost intoxicating. I hesitated for only a moment, the wrench heavy in my hand. Then, with a deep breath, I stepped onto the first rough step, descending into the unknown. The sound of the storm was muffled now, replaced by the relentless thrumming that seemed to emanate from the very fabric of the earth beneath me. The tunnel narrowed, forcing me to hunch over. The walls pressed in, soft and yielding in places, firm and woody in others. My fingers brushed against slick, cool surfaces, then coarse, bristly ones. I could feel the faint, rhythmic pulse vibrating through the root-like material. A steady, slow beat, like a colossal heart hidden deep underground. The descent felt endless. Each step took me further from the world I knew, deeper into this organic labyrinth. The air became thick, almost viscous, and the sweet, earthy smell intensified, carrying a faint metallic undertone now. Then the tunnel opened. I stumbled into a vast, cavernous space, a cathedral of living tissue. My breath caught in my throat. The walls, the ceiling, the very floor, all were composed of a dense, interwoven network of colossal roots and fungal growths. They pulsed with a faint, internal luminescence, a soft, sickly green light that seemed to ebb and flow with the rhythmic thrumming. Some of the roots were as thick as tree trunks, snaking across the cavern, disappearing into the distant gloom. Others were delicate, gossamer threads, hanging like spectral curtains. And everywhere, clinging to the roots, growing in vast, undulating carpets on the floor, were immense, pale fungal structures. Some resembled grotesque, fleshy mushrooms, their caps the size of dinner plates. Others were like vast, porous sponges, slowly expanding and contracting. They weren't inert. They moved. Slowly, imperceptibly, a constant organic shift and swell. The thrumming here was deafening, a low, resonant hum that vibrated through my entire body, making my teeth ache. It wasn't just a sound. It was a presence, a living force. And the smell, that cloying, sweet, earthy scent was overwhelming now, thick enough to taste, a saccharine decay that pricked at my throat. This wasn't just a network. This was the core, the beating, breathing, monstrous heart of Blackwood Manor. Ilara hadn't just cultivated a garden. He had nurtured a god. And I had just walked right into its embrace. I wasn't just an inheritor. I was an intruder. And something told me, with an icy certainty that pierced through the humid air, that this entity was now fully awake. And it knew I was here. And there, almost completely obscured by the moss and a pile of crumbling stone, was a structure. It wasn't a natural rock formation, nor was it part of the tower's foundation. This was something carved, something deliberate, though worn smooth by time and the encroaching green. It was a low, wide archway, barely taller than my waist, leading into utter blackness. The air that seeped from it was thick and earthy, carrying a damp chill that felt ancient, a smell like turned soil and something else. Something metallic and faintly sweet, like sap from an injured tree. My flashlight beam struggled against the oppressive gloom of the archway. Rain lashed against the narrow, broken windows high above, creating a distorted symphony of wind and water. I knelt, my knees sinking into the wet, spongy moss, and peered closer. The edges of the archway were not straight, but rippled, almost organic in their irregularity. What could she have been doing down here, in the heart of this crumbling structure, exposed to the elements? The question, once a simple inquiry, now felt loaded, heavy with implication. The air grew heavier, pressing in on me, and I felt a strange dizziness, a subtle shift in my perception. It wasn't stone at all, or not just stone. Beneath the moss, the texture was oddly fibrous, like petrified wood, but with a smooth, almost polished quality in places. It felt alive, dormant, yet humming with a low, imperceptible vibration that resonated in my fingertips. I shook my head, trying to clear the fog. "Just the wind," I muttered, my voice thin and reedy against the storm's fury. And then, a flash. A vivid, sickening image of the overturned car, the glint of shattered glass, the silent, still figure slumped against the airbag. It was just a fragment, a brutal, unwelcome intrusion from the past I'd tried so desperately to outrun. The archway seemed to pulse, a faint, sickly green light emanating from its depths, mirroring the moss. The metallic sweet scent intensified, becoming cloying, intoxicating. It wasn't just Ilara's garden anymore. It was something deeper, something that extended far beyond the manor walls, a vast subterranean network. The Root. The name surfaced unbidden in my mind, a concept rather than a label, a terrifying understanding of the true nature of this place. It wasn't just a house, it was the visible tip of something immense, something ancient and hungry. My mind reeled. The visions intensified, no longer fleeting glimpses but full-blown hallucinatory replays. I saw the wreckage again, clearer this time, heard the sirens, felt the gut-wrenching despair. The air grew heavy with the scent of loam and decay, mixed with the acrid tang of burnt rubber. Panic clawed at my throat, but it was quickly overshadowed by something far more insidious. A profound, unsettling sense of belonging. "You are one of us. You belong here." The words weren't spoken, not truly, but they resonated with an undeniable authority deep within my consciousness. It was a siren song, promising peace, an end to the gnawing grief. If only I would surrender. My resolve, once so firm, began to fray. The manor wasn't just influencing me, it was rewriting me, attempting to integrate my very essence into its own. The storm outside raged, a furious counterpoint to the growing stillness within me. My hands, still resting on the fibrous archway, felt a warmth now, a low, steady thrumming that was both alien and strangely familiar. I was becoming part of Blackwood Manor, part of the Root, and it was reaching out to embrace me. The thought, once terrifying, now held a perverse, unsettling allure. Listening. The rain hammered the decrepit guard tower, a relentless percussion against the ancient stones. Wind shrieked through the gaps, carrying the metallic tang of ozone and the damp, earthy scent of the forest floor. I knelt, my fingers tracing the low, wide structure almost completely hidden beneath the moss and crumbling rock. It wasn't just carved, it was sculpted. The patterns were organic, a repeating motif of intertwining tendrils and bulbous nodes, like a magnified cross-section of some enormous alien root system. My breath hitched. This wasn't some historical marker, not a forgotten piece of local folklore. This was a blueprint, a diagram. It depicted exactly what I'd seen sprouting from the walls of the manor, what pulsed beneath the conservatory's floor. This structure, tucked away in the storm-lashed tower, was a map of the entity's hidden architecture. It wasn't just growing in the manor. The manor itself was merely the most visible manifestation of something far older, far more widespread. The roots, I realized with a sickening lurch in my gut, ran deeper than I could have ever imagined. A wave of nausea washed over me, not from the cold or the exhaustion, but from a profound sense of violation. This wasn't just a house I'd inherited. It was a cage, a trap, and I was being drawn into its very core. Running was no longer an option. There was no escape if this thing was so deeply embedded, so ancient, so fundamental to this land. My great-aunt Alara hadn't just stumbled upon it. He had been consumed by it, nurtured it, perhaps even become part of its network. The thought chilled me to the bone. If I didn't sever this connection, if I didn't fight back, I would follow her. I pushed myself up, my muscles screaming in protest, not just parts of it, but its very heart. And I knew exactly where that heart beat strongest: the conservatory. The trek back to the manor was a blur of wind-whipped branches and ankle-deep mud. The storm seemed to intensify with every step I took towards the house, as if the manor itself was bracing for my return, or perhaps trying to deter me. The air grew heavy, thick with the smell of wet earth and that cloying, sickly sweet perfume that clung to the conservatory. I burst through the side door, soaked to the bone, my teeth chattering. My hands fumbled for the latch, then scrabbled for the handle of the old felling axe leaning against the far wall. It was heavy, the steel head pitted with rust, the wooden haft smooth from countless years of use. It felt crude, but capable. With the axe clutched in my numb fingers, I stalked towards the conservatory. The glass walls, usually a source of light, were now obscured by the lashing rain, making the interior seem even more murky and foreboding. The air inside was stifling, humid, and the sweet, decaying scent was almost suffocating. The tendrils I'd seen before had thickened, some now as wide as my forearm, pulsing faintly beneath their mossy surfaces. They snaked across the floor, up the walls, and into the ceiling, a dense, organic tapestry that seemed to shimmer with an unnatural vitality. I raised the axe, the rusty metal gleaming dully in the dim light. My target, the enormous gnarled root system that erupted from the floor in the center of the conservatory, where the growth was thickest, most vibrant. This was it. This felt like the core. I swung, a desperate, clumsy arc. The axe bit deep into the fibrous mass with a sickening thwack. But the impact didn't just meet resistance. It met retaliation. The conservatory seemed to groan, a deep, resonant sound that vibrated through the floorboards and up my legs. The tendrils around me, previously inert, began to twitch. Slowly at first, then with increasing speed, they writhed and coiled. Smaller, hair-thin filaments shot out from the main mass, lashing like whips, brushing against my exposed skin with an icy, stinging touch. I swung again, a frantic, adrenaline-fueled assault. This time, the reaction was more violent. The entire central root system began to convulse, tearing at the surrounding floorboards, splintering wood with explosive force. Then the illusions began. A low, guttural growl rumbled from the depths of the growth, a sound that wasn't animal, but something far more ancient and predatory. I saw a face, Ilara's face, contorted in a silent scream, appear for a split second in the glistening surface of a particularly large leaf, only to vanish as I blinked. Panic flared, but I fought it down. I had to keep going. I raised the axe for a third strike, aiming for the deepest cut I could make. As I brought it down, a thick, thorny vine, previously unnoticed, erupted from the floor beside me. It lashed out with terrifying speed, wrapping around my right leg, digging its sharp barbs into my flesh. A searing pain shot up my limb, and I cried out, stumbling. The axe clattered from my grasp, sliding across the damp stone floor. I fell hard, my head striking something solid. The vine tightened, crushing my leg, and more tendrils, now thick and rope-like, snaked out, pinning my arms to the floor. The air grew impossibly heavy, the sweet, sickly scent now overwhelming, filling my lungs with its cloying presence. It wasn't just a plant. It was a consciousness, ancient and hungry, and it was aware of me. My vision blurred, but through the haze, I saw the central root system, the one I had tried to destroy, begin to shift and expand. It wasn't just growing, it was morphing. The intertwining tendrils and nodes I'd seen carved in the tower were becoming clearer, more defined in the living mass before me. And within that evolving structure, I saw something else, something terrifyingly familiar. A cavity, a chamber forming, perfectly sized. For me. The entity wasn't just trying to trap me, it was preparing to assimilate me. My struggles weakened. The pain in my leg was excruciating, and the tendrils around my arms were like iron bands. It spoke a single word, a promise, a threat. Welcome. I knelt, my fingers tracing the low, wide structure almost completely hidden beneath the gnarled roots of an ancient oak that had long ago claimed the tower's foundation. It wasn't stone, as I'd first thought, but a section of thick, waterlogged timber, intricately carved, almost seamlessly integrated into the base. Rain sluiced down my face, blurring my vision, but I could feel the faint, raised patterns beneath my fingertips. Symbols I'd seen before, in faded tapestries within the manor's neglected library. My breath hitched. This wasn't some natural anomaly. It was deliberate. With renewed urgency, I pressed against the wood, searching for a seam, a latch. The wood was swollen, resistant, but I found a small, almost invisible indentation, a deep recess where my finger could hook. I pulled. The timber groaned, a sound swallowed by the storm, and then, with a wet, grinding protest, a section of the base gave way. Behind it wasn't earth, but a small, dark cavity. A peculiar, cloying sweetness, like overripe fruit mingled with damp soil, wafted out, stronger than the clean smell of the rain. I reached into the void, my fingers brushing against something slick and cold, then something else. A bundle, tightly wrapped in thick, oily canvas. My heart thrummed, a frantic drum against my ribs. This had to be it. I wrestled the bundle free, pulling it into the meager light filtering through the storm. My hands trembled as I unwrapped the canvas, revealing a leather-bound journal, its cover embossed with the same intricate symbols I'd felt on the timber panel. The leather was supple despite its age, and a faint, almost imperceptible pulsing seemed to emanate from it, a rhythmic vibration against my palms. I flipped it open, the pages stiff but intact, protected by the canvas. Ilara's familiar, elegant script filled the pages, but something was different. I found the last entry, dated only days before her death. It is not a cage, as I once feared, but a cradle. The root has chosen me, as it chose those before me. Its tendrils, once merely seeking purchase, now sing of synthesis, of a union deeper than blood, older than time. I swallowed, a dry, metallic taste filling my mouth. My eyes scanned the next lines, my mind reeling. The ritual is simple, yet profound. A communion. To offer oneself not as sacrifice, but as a vessel. To let the self dissolve, to become the conduit through which its essence flows, to nurture and to be nurtured. The garden will bloom anew, Blake, my dear nephew. A garden unlike any the world has ever seen. My legacy, our legacy. The words blurred. Blake, my dear nephew. He knew. He had planned this. Alara wasn't a victim. He was a willing participant, a devotee. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. She hadn't been trapped. He had embraced it. Her reclusiveness wasn't fear, but devotion. Her peculiar gardens weren't just botanical experiments. They were extensions of this monstrous living network, tended with a perverse love. My gaze dropped to the final paragraph, my hands shaking so violently I almost dropped the journal. The manor demands its due. The cycle must continue. When the time comes, it will call for you, Blake. Listen, yield, become one. Only then will the true flowering begin. Do not resist. It is futile. It is magnificent. The journal clattered to the damp stone as it slipped from my grasp. Rain lashed my face, but I barely felt it. The wind howled through the guard tower, no longer just a storm, but a chorus of hungry voices, a resonant hum that seemed to originate from deep within the earth, vibrating through the very stones I knelt upon. The sweet, sick scent of the organic growths intensified, suddenly suffocating, pressing in on me from all sides. The manor wasn't just a house, it was a living, breathing entity, its pulse now a tangible rhythm against my own. And it was calling. Alara's words echoed in my mind. Do not resist. It is magnificent. Futility. Magnificence. There was no escape. Not in the traditional sense. The manor had roots deeper than I could comprehend, reaching out, pulling me in. It wanted me. It demanded me. To succumb, to become a part of this grotesque, eternal garden, to dissolve my very self into its hungry embrace. Or to fight. To resist this insidious pull, to find some impossible, desperate way to sever its hold, even if it meant tearing the manor, and perhaps myself, apart in the process. The choice, stark and terrifying, lay before me. The wind shrieked, a final warning or a beckoning. My muscles tensed, my jaw set. I would not yield. Not to this, not to Alara's twisted legacy. I would find a way. I had to. Futility, magnificence. I stood there shivering, drenched to the bone in the decrepit guard tower in a storm, the wind a banshee's wail tearing through the broken windows. Rain lashed against the ancient stones, each drop a tiny hammer blow against the crumbling mortar. The darkness outside was absolute, swallowing the entire landscape beyond the faint, flickering glow of my dying flashlight. There was no escape, not in the traditional sense. It wanted me. It demanded me. To succumb. To become. The thought felt like a physical intrusion, a cold tendril coiling around my spine. My great-aunt, Alara, hadn't just died here. He had become here. I understood it now, with a clarity that felt both horrifying and inevitable. He was never truly the reclusive botanist, merely the current vessel, the conscious conduit for something far older, far more vast than any botanical specimen. Her gardens weren't just outside. They were woven into the very fabric of Blackwood Manor, and now into her. And through her, into me. The air in the tower, already thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying stone, now carried a faint, sweet, cloying odor. It was the same smell that permeated the deepest, most unsettling parts of the manor, the one that clung to the strange, organic growths I'd seen. It was the smell of life. Yes, but a life utterly alien, utterly consuming. It was the scent of the root. The wind howled. a guttural roar that seemed to vibrate through the very rock beneath my feet. I could almost hear the manor breathing, a slow, deliberate inhale and exhale that was both the storm and something far more ancient. It was a living thing, this house, and I was caught in its lungs. It wasn't a voice I recognized, but it was familiar, a lingering echo of Alara's presence, merged with something vast and indifferent. Join us, understand, be at peace. Peace. The word was a siren song, a lure to a weary soul. My personal tragedy, the reason I'd fled to this isolated corner of the world, still gnawed at me. The loneliness, the grief, the crushing weight of it all. But at what cost? My very self? My consciousness, absorbed into a collective, a vast fungal network of forgotten lives? I clenched my jaw, the muscles aching. My great-aunt had surrendered. Perhaps she'd been too tired to fight, too broken by her own hidden sorrows. Or perhaps, like a fly to a Venus trap, the lure had been too strong. But I was not her. I was Blake. And even in this decrepit guard tower in a storm, facing down an ancient evil that wanted to erase me, I felt a spark of defiance. Escape, I knew, was a fool's errand. The manor owned the land, the air, perhaps even the sky above it. But I could try to sever the connection, to break free enough to reclaim my own mind. I remembered the strange, glowing spores I'd seen, the ones that seemed to pulse with an inner light, the very seeds of the root. If the manor was a living organism, then perhaps its growth could be stunted, its hunger momentarily redirected. I had nothing but my wits, my desperation, and the faint, almost extinguished flashlight in my hand. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, I turned my back on the precipice, on the storm, and plunged deeper into the tower's crumbling interior, following the faint glow of the spores. The whisper intensified, a low thrumming in my skull, urging me to stop, to embrace. I found them in a small, alcove-like chamber beneath the main tower, a cluster of the bioluminescent spores, pulsing with an unnatural, sickly green light. They were rooted directly into the stone, a network of fine, hair-like tendrils spreading across the damp walls, feeding, growing. This was a node, a concentrated point of the root's influence. This was where Alara had spent her final days, tending to this. My mind raced. If I couldn't destroy the root, perhaps I could wound it, make myself an unpalatable meal. I remembered the old, half-mad ramblings of a former groundskeeper, a man dismissed years ago for his delusions about the manor. He spoke of the blight, a way to starve the feeders. He'd talked about salt. Industrial salt meant for roads, but it had to be pure, unadulterated. He'd even tried to order some years ago before he was let go. It was a long shot, a desperate, half-remembered fragment of madness. But it was all I had. I had seen the groundskeeper's shed, abandoned and overgrown, tucked away near the old stables. There was a chance, a slim, improbable chance, he might have had some. Do not resist. This is your purpose. No, I rasped, my voice hoarse. My purpose is my own. Turning, I scrambled back up the crumbling steps, the wind and rain now a welcome, cleansing assault compared to the insidious pull of the root. I had to try. The sprint across the rain-slicked grounds was a blur of mud, wind, and the skeletal branches of trees lashing at me like whips. The manor loomed behind me, a vast, breathing leviathan, its ancient windows like unblinking eyes. I could feel its gaze, its hunger, a palpable weight pressing down on me. It knew my intention. It would not let me go easily. When I finally stumbled into the groundskeeper's shed, the air was thick with dust and the smell of rust and decaying wood. My flashlight beam cut through the gloom, revealing old tools, cobwebs, and stacks of forgotten supplies. And there, in a corner, beneath a tattered tarp, were several heavy sacks. Rock salt, industrial grade. A desperate, almost manic laugh escaped my lips. It was here. It was actually here. With trembling hands, I tore open a bag, scooping handfuls of the coarse, crystalline salt. It wouldn't kill the root, I knew that. But maybe, just maybe, it could repel it, sicken it, create enough of a barrier to allow me to escape its immediate grasp. I raced back towards the guard tower, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. The ground seemed to shift beneath my feet, the branches of the surrounding trees thrashing wildly, as if trying to ensnare me. Back in the alcove, I began to spread the salt, liberally, frantically, over the glowing spores, over the tendrils creeping across the stone. The effect was immediate, horrifying. The spores began to sizzle, shrinking, retracting with a sound like tiny, wet screams. The sickly green light flickered, dimmed. The cloying scent intensified, now mixed with something acrid, burning. The roar from the manor was deafening, a frustrated, ancient bellow that shook the very foundations of the tower. It was in pain. I was hurting it. My hands were raw, stinging from the salt, my body screaming with exhaustion, but I kept going, pouring more, covering every inch of the glowing growth. And then, just as suddenly, it stopped. The light from the spores was gone. The tendrils had withered, leaving behind only black, desiccated husks. The silence was absolute, broken only by the relentless fury of the storm. I stood there, panting, covered in salt and grime, my body trembling. I had done it. I had fought back. The rage, the hunger, the ancient consciousness of the root had receded, but it hadn't vanished. It had merely been driven inward, deep into the manor's core, and deeper still, into something far more intimate. As I walked away from Blackwood Manor, my clothes soaked, my skin crawling, I knew I was irrevocably changed. I had escaped, yes, but not without consequence. It was all still there, a phantom limb of horror. I had severed the connection, but a piece of the root, a sliver of its consciousness, had taken hold within me. It lay dormant, for now. Waiting. The manor remained, silent and brooding in the storm, its vast, ancient evil unbroken. It had merely lost a battle, not the war. Blackwood Manor would wait, and I would carry its secret, its enduring horror for the rest of my days.